And so another history lesson about the poverty-stricken English gentility.
I always believed that democracy was overrated, which is why I've got where I am today.
And the less than genteel behaviour of the bold bad boys who decided the rich were just the people to provide them with the means to live in the style they'd like to become accustomed to. One of the most enduring romantic myths of English history is the myth of the gentleman highwayman. It's a load of balderdash. These guys were cutthroats all. Nearly all of them ended their spectacularly brief careers on the rope's end, and with their bodies tarred and gibbeted, hanging from an oak tree at some busy crossroads. There was nothing really romantic about these guys when you come down to it. When they stood there on the top of some lonely hill, presented their pistols and cried, "Stand and deliver! Your money or your life!" That's exactly what they meant. You didn't hand it over. The most famous highwayman of the lot, the one you've all heard of, Dick Turpin. And boy was Richard well named, because he was a right little Richard, a complete and utter turd. The romantic, swashbuckling hero of all the novels and all the films. Nothing could have been further from the truth. Turpin was a thoroughgoing psychopath. He thought nothing of leaving his mates in the lurch. He was a murderer. He was a rapist. And the only time in his entire life that he behaved with anything like the style and elegance of popular legend was the day he put his neck in the noose on the scaffold in York. I don't like Dick Turpin. This is the Blue Bell at Hempstead in Essex, and this is where Dick was born. In those days it was known as the Bell Inn, I assume, because it's just below the tower of the church, within sound of the bells. And it was here that Dick learned to read and write. He was taught by the local schoolmaster, John Smith. Remember that, because that was going to play a very important part in his downfall. You can always rely on the wall of a pub to tell you all about the history of the local highwayman. The one thing you can't rely on it, though, is for it to be open when you've traipsed all the way here in the expectation of a nice pint and a pie. It's closed until further notice. Lord knows why, but all sorts of places claim Mr. T as their very own native-born son. Thaxted in Essex gets my vote. Apprenticed in trade, Richard learnt the business of butchery, and so duly set up shop on his own account. And if, like me, you go with the story that he owned a butcher's shop here in Thaxted, then this is the very one. Morning.
Good morning.
Vincent, is this your finest rum?
That certainly is the very best.
Well, I asked you to get it out because you know Turpin had a great fondness for rum.
No.
When he was a housebreaker, he was known to have a favourite method of interrogation. He would flip up the skirts of the woman of the house and shove her rump onto the range or onto the fire and hold her there with his boot until her buttocks began to sizzle. And then he would put the very pertinent question, where is all the money hidden? Not surprisingly, people who didn't want to tell him because they'd lose their life savings suddenly became very talkative when they or their wives were put to the fire. Like I said, not a nice man.
I was just warming to him then.
No. Now Thaxted, you know, had been famous as a knife-making town. And that probably accounts for young Dick's early success as a butcher, because he had a distinct edge over the competition. You see, he wasn't always too fussed about acquiring his meat through the legal and proper channels. He went out by night and rustled it. Hell of a profit margin when you think about it. The trouble is, when someone caught him half-inching a pair of oxen from another parish, they pretty soon had the law after him. And that brought Dick's legal butchering career to an end. Just like today, many folk gauge the position of people on the social ladder by the set of wheels they drove around in.
In you go, James, dear sweet boy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll keep this for the journey.
All right.
Thank you. Now, look, we're in a hurry,
Yeah.
so get on with it.
Transport for most folk was Shanks's pony.
One for the road. I say, I thought you'd like this. Just help us on our way. What? Don't spare the horses.
But for anyone with any money or social pretension, they rode everywhere, either on horseback or, for the truly wealthy, a personal coach. A personal coach that left you in no doubt at all that this conspicuously opulent status symbol was the private property of a wealthy, well-connected and powerful person. A natural target for the likes of Dick Turpin and his chums. Anyone taking on such powerful people was putting themselves in a world of hurt. Take down your first coach and you could look forward to a life on the run, constantly looking over your shoulder, constantly jumping at shadows, as Dick was about to discover. Poor old Dick's chestnuts were well and truly in the fire. He had absolutely no desire whatsoever to be hanged for a sheep, or a lamb, nor an ox neither. So like any self-respecting budding criminal, he did a runner. Now, some folk will tell you that he took himself off and joined a notorious smuggling gang working the Essex coast out of Canvey. Others that he went south and worked a concessionary ciabatta and cappuccino bar on the promenade at Bournemouth. You pays your money, you takes your choice. My money goes on the fact that he came here to Epping Forest. You see, this is Loughton Camp, an ancient ringwork, and traditionally, this is the site where Dick hid away from the law. He met up with a highwayman called Tom King. Together, the pair of them spent some time poaching around the area. Remember, Dick was a butcher, so he had the very useful skill of being able to butcher the carcasses before they sold the venison on into London. But it wasn't long before the pair of them decided that they could do much better, embarking on a life of crime as highwaymen. From their thieves' den, King and Turpin regularly rode out and terrorised travellers on the roads in and out of London. And this was their hideout. They hid in a cave in Epping Forest. Not your old singing, old dancing cave in a rock face, none of them around here, but there are plenty of deep holes in the ground. And when you cover a deep hole in the ground and you disguise it, in East Anglia, smugglers always call them caves. That's where they hid their contraband. But here in the heart of Epping Forest, it's where Dick and Tom hid away, literally holed up, gone to ground.
I thought we would read Psalm 23. Then start it off.
The Lord is my shepherd.
I shall not want.
He maketh me
He maketh me
to lie lie down.
Stand and deliver!
Now, some highwaymen really lived up to their romantic image. They were urbane and gentlemanly, gallant and gracious.
You're not really serious? We have nothing.
Hey, quiet!
We have nothing. Oh,
Till they so much as sniffed the possibility that they weren't going to get their own way. Then things turned very nasty, very quickly.
That's all we have. We have nothing else. Bring it.
Ah,
We just have a small bag of
that's
money.
more like it.
Just a small bag.
Let's have that.
There are heirlooms.
Give us the money. Come on, you Back in the coach. Back in the coach. Keep still, driver.
You horrible man! May I see you hanged and gibbeted!
But their new age, back to nature idyll wasn't going to last. There came a day when the servant of a forest keeper, Tom Morris, stumbled on their hidey hole. Turpin spotted him, chased after him, levelled his pistol and brought him down with a brace of bullets. The countryside round about were outraged at this foul murder. A royal proclamation, no less, offered a reward of £200, a small fortune, for information which would lead to the conviction of these ruthless murderers. Turpin started using his alias of John Palmer, but he sensed the net was closing around him. They were cornered in a tavern. No surprise there. In the scuffle that ensued, Turpin somehow managed to discharge his pistol and bring down his accomplice, King. He managed to escape, leaving Tom King to face the music. He went to the gallows, and Turpin, very sensibly, decided it was time he went north. Turpin, though, never made the famous breakneck ride to York. Black Bess was actually ridden by another personality highwayman, Swift Nick Neverson, but jobbing journalists laid it to Turpin's credit. Dick went to Yorkshire to turn horse thief. The thing is, horse stealing was a potentially capital offence. Dick was in a panic. He wrote here to Hempstead to his brother-in-law asking for help. Unfortunately, the letter was also seen by his old schoolmaster, John Smith, the very man who taught Turpin to read and write in the first place, and he recognised the handwriting. Whether he just decided to be a good, upstanding citizen, or whether as a teacher he, was overworked, underpaid like they are, and decided to shop in for the £200 reward that had been declared by royal proclamation, we'll never know. What we do know is that Smith took himself off up to York Jail and duly identified John Palmer, horse trader and erstwhile horse thief, as none other than Dick Turpin, the notorious highwayman. They strung him up outside York on April the 7th, 1739. He appropriately named Knavesmire. He was 33 years old. Not much of a life, was it? And he thoroughly deserved to have it taken from him. But in fairness, he made a good fist of ending his life well. He'd held court for several weeks in jail. People had come to visit him. He was the 9 days wonder. He sent out for a new suit, a new hat and new shoes. He put a lot of money out to persuade people to wear black gloves and black hat bands and to follow his funeral cortege, the wagon that took him to the gallows. On his way, he made great play of bowing to the ladies, blowing them kisses, chatting amiably with the executioner. And when the crowd grew a little bit restless and started the slow hand clap, he tightened the noose around his neck and leapt off the ladder. It was a good trick to try and break your neck. It didn't work for Dick. He took 5 minutes to die. You won't find his grave here in Hempstead. They buried him in Yorkshire. And you nearly never found him there either, because the following morning, well-wishers, so they say, going to the grave to lay flowers, found a group of body snatchers busily taking the body away. So they gave chase and they abandoned the body in a garden. They never caught the grave robbers, but they did recover Dick's remains, took them back, put them back in and covered them with quicklime. Do you know one of the real problems we have with the history of Highwayman is that as the years go by, layer after layer after layer of legend builds up around the original story. And if you want to get at the truth of what really happened, you have to peel back all those layers one by one. And the most stubborn of all those layers is when there's romantic interest, when there's a love story in there. Behind me, down in the valley, is no man's land in Hertfordshire. This was the stamping ground of Lady Catherine Ferrers, the Wicked Lady, the most notorious of all the highway women in English history. Or was she? The tale is told that Lady Catherine Ferrers was married off to a tedious elderly husband, more interested in rates of interest than in keeping his interesting young wife interested in him. Silly sausage. Bored beyond belief, but inspired by tales of a dashing highwayman prowling the byways of Hertfordshire, Catherine spiced her life up not by taking a lover, like any self-respecting restoration beauty was supposed to do. Oh no, she decided on a life of part-time criminality. If she had to be a bored housewife by day, by night, she would be a highway woman. When she crossed the path of the mysterious highwayman, it turned out to be Ralph Chaplin, one of her tenant farmers. The pair of them decided to ride together, in every sense of the word. Right. Sympathy for the presenter, please. You see, I always have a real difficulty sorting out the history from the fiction in these sort of stories, because all sorts of people have a vested interest in keeping the old legend rolling along. Tourist information centres, pub owners, they're all really interested in packing the punters in, and they're not too fussed about how accurate the history is. I tell you, I've been in places where I could have slapped down on the counter primary source, proof positive documentary evidence that the very night before they chopped King Charles's head off, Oliver Cromwell was upstairs in a back bedroom with a troop of trampolining dwarf nuns. And the response would be, oh, that's interesting. Have we told you about the ghost of a fiddler and his dog? And we've got this secret tunnel that they went up that leads to the church and the monastery over the hill. I somehow don't think this place is going to be any more use to me than all the others. Still, ever the optimist, eh? Well, it'll come as no surprise to any of you that this rattling bodice ripper of a yarn has been told and retold for so long that eventually it was given the full Hollywood blockbuster treatment. Twice, no less. First with Margaret Lockwood and then with Faye Dunaway. So it must be true. Still, I'll just check with the locals to be sure. Catherine and Ralph's love blossomed, and their career boomed, literally. They were so blissfully, deliriously happy with one another, they wanted to share their joy with all the world. So they made it a point of honour in all their robberies never to kill anyone. Well, not more than once. On a frosty, moonlit night in August, a gentleman's coach came lumbering up the lane. Ralph and Catherine broke cover and trotted out onto the highway, presented their pistols and cried the immortal words, "Stand and deliver!" But the gentlemen were ready. They'd come tooled up. In the exchange of fire between both parties, Ralph was wounded. Catherine didn't know and galloped off into the night. The gentlemen dragged him from the saddle, and as soon as they realised who they'd captured, they pulled a rope from the coach, threw it over a beam, and strung him up there and then on this very spot. So the locals do say. They'll tell you that this is the very gallows beam where Ralph Chaplin choked out his life. We'll never know. Kate went berserk with grief. Each night she'd sneak out and cold-bloodedly shoot down anyone connected with her lover's demise. And then one fateful night, in an exchange of fire, a pistol ball whispered its way into her belly. They found her sprawled across her secret staircase, the one she shared with the blind fiddler and his dog. And you know, there's not a single scrap of solid documentary evidence to support any of this tosh. Now there's a surprise. As a lifelong socialist, I feel it's terribly important to take a really active role in the redistribution of the nation's wealth. Flesh pots of Milton Keynes, coachman.